Evolutionary.org presents Evolutionary Hardcore Podcast with your co-hosts, Steve from the American Underground and Mobster from the UK Iron Den. Get ready for the most hardcore and underground info in the industry. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Good afternoon, guys. Stevesmi here in Mobster in the house. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, fella?
Good. This is Evolutionary Hardcore Radio, episode 101, guys. If you haven't checked out episode 100, great episode. Go back and check that one out, too. But this is episode 101. So this time we have 5 awesome topics headed your way. So let's get right to it, Mobster. The first one is going to be N2 guard with orals. How and why? So let me go over, first off, N2 guard. What happens when you run oral steroids? We all know liver. The first thing everyone thinks of is liver. And that is a major problem because oral steroids do strain your liver. Just depends on which one it is. Some more than others. So the nice thing about N2 guard, it's got several ingredients that are specifically designed for the liver. It's got TUDCA. It's got picrolive. It's got astragalus root extract. It's got milk thistle. It's got hawthorn berry. It's got dandelion root. And all these ingredients are great for cleansing out your liver while you're on an oral. So basically, that's not the only thing, though, that N2 guard has when it comes to your health. It also has benefits for your heart health. It also has benefits for your kidneys, for all your organs. Basically, it's going to make you feel a heck of a lot better when you're running it. That's why we want to use N2 guard always. 7 caps a day is the average dose. And you want to kind of, when you take the N2 guard, you want to take it away from any type of oral, any type of drug, because what the ingredients in it can actually help cleanse out those drugs out of your system. And that kind of will make a difference. So I recommend taking the N2 guard about 2 hours away from any drug that you take just to be safe. An hour is probably going to be safe, but I always recommend 2 hours. And, that's going to help. That's not going to interfere with your orals, and it's going to help cleanse out your body. So, we got pipes in our house. We flush the toilet. The sewage goes. Now, N2 guard is going to help your body flush out the same garbage out of your system. So it really makes a big difference. Mobster, tell us a little bit about N2 guard and your experience with N2 guard. How do you like to use it?
Well, I've actually used N2 guard recently with the Anavar cycle that I did a few months back. And as you say, I'm a great one for taking my supplements first thing in the morning. Anavar would have been shortly after. I know there's some dosing protocol suggestions on our forums, and the guys should check that out 100%. And for me, I would stick with the dosing suggestion per day, which is the 7 tablets. There are ways, and as per the forum suggestions about splitting up the dosage through the day, I don't think you actually need to do that. But as Steve Smith's already said, it's going to come down to when you train, when you take your steroids, the half-life of the steroids, and so on. So, if I wasn't training Debo, I'd probably have 3 times a day. So I want to have my N2 guard first thing in the morning, and then an hour or so later, I'd have my first dose of Debo, and then again later in the day, and then another one shortly before bedtime for the roughly 8 to 9 hours half-life. And I keep it. Steve Smith knows this already, and any of the forum regulars knows this already. I keep my stuff very simple, very straightforward. You're not talking about huge dramatic differences, guys. Honestly, it seems sometimes we get members feels like they want to overcomplicate things. You don't need to overcomplicate things. Follow the instructions. And as Steve Smith suggested, if the issue is there that when you take them, you're going to negate somewhat, and it would only be a small amount the effect of the steroid that you're taking, then give it an hour, give it 90 minutes. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Don't overcomplicate things. Steve Smith?
When I first used N2 guard, this was years ago, and I noticed when I ran it on cycle and then ran out of the N2 guard and then kept the cycle going, I noticed like a few days later, I started feeling the side effects of the cycle. I started feeling more tired. My sleep was a little more disrupted. just something was off. So then I'd order another bottle of N2Guard and then start taking it again. And then boom, I'd feel so much better within a couple of days. So N2Guard is really an amazing compound. It's got 44 ingredients in it that all work in synergy. It was a tremendous, the development of N2Guard was amazing because whoever came up with it knew exactly how much of ingredients to put in it. And it really, really helps. It saves a fortune. I can remember before N2Guard, I was spending $300-$500 on my support supplements. So always you want to use N2Guard on a cycle. If you can afford to use it on PCT, half the dosage on PCT at minimum, and then like off cycle, if you can afford to use it here and there, it's tremendous. But really, you can use it, year round with breaks here and there.
Yeah, I was gonna add what Steve Z says is 100% correct, and I was just gonna say from my million years of training and whatever else, we used to have to do exactly what Steve Smith just said, which is go out and buy a bunch of products, which we don't have to do now, and stuff like this is a saving grace. I'm old enough to remember the Live 52 and the Milk Thistle and all those other kind of supplements that we were taking back in the day, and unless you're, and believe you me, even with the amount of supplements I'm taking now, it's no fun whatsoever to choke down 10 or 15 tablets in the morning with my English cup of tea. Choking down 30 or 40 tablets like we used to have to do in the old days was a lot. Honestly, you ended up spreading those bastards out because it was just a pain in the ass to get them down. So N2Guard is going to make that sort of thing very easy. It's all there. It's all in one product. And we had a topic come up on the forum the other day, which is where you could break down the individual ingredients and start to get into, how much of this ingredient, how much of that ingredient. And I think what we covered then, what we can cover now, is that it's a synergistic effect. It's that all of the ingredients together with their profile, you have a small amount of this and a small amount of that, and those things together is what's working for you. I think something else Steve just said as well, which I want to touch upon, and that is you don't always notice with certain products how you feel or whether you're getting any side effects and whatever else. And I'm joint thing is a big one for me, where I don't notice it, and then when I run out, I notice that I need it. And I think N2Guard's like that. It's one of those things you take along with an AI. You take these things and hope that you don't need them. But if you don't take them, you'll soon know when you need them. And N2Guard's right up there. It's not incredibly expensive for what it does. It saves, in fact, it does save a small fortune based on the other ingredients and all the things that we used to have to do. And it's one of those things that you don't want to have to need, but you're going to do it. And finally, I think it's one of those things with regards to what we're doing when it comes to oral steroids. Don't forget, guys, that other things that you can be doing, drinking alcohol, for example, is going to be causing a little bit of damage, especially if you're drinking daily or having heavy weekends. And a product like this is going to have that effect. You're taking an oral steroid, you might be doing those other things. You will need something to protect your liver. You will need something like N2Guard to do that job for you, 100%. Steve?
All right, guys. So next topic is Cardarine GW, how to use it for cardio boost. So let me explain first how Cardarine works, because a lot of people don't understand this concept, especially if you're inexperienced. But if you ever get a heart rate monitor and you hook it up to your body and you kind of observe what happens during a workout, I think you'll understand the concept behind Cardarine and why Cardarine is so dang good for endurance. So basically, when you work out, let's say you're going to go do a mile run, for example. During that run, your heart rate's going to start going up, okay? Now let's say you sprint, okay? Sprint as fast as you can. Your heart rate is going to go up to your maximum heart rate. So if you take your age, subtract it by, you take 220 and subtract your age from that. That's going to give you your maximum heart rate. So if you're 40 years old, you take 220 minus 40, it's going to put it at 180. So that's your maximum heart rate is 180, okay? In theory, when you run as fast as you can around the track, you're going to be able to hit about 180, and that's the maximum that your heart rate's going to be able to go. Now, so now here's the thing with Cardarine. If you're on Cardarine, you're going to be able to run around that lap with more force, but your heart rate will will take longer to get to the maximum heart rate. So be able to push more for longer on Cardarine. Now, if you were to take a stimulant before that 1 mile run or that sprint around the track, you're basically going to hit that maximum heart rate a lot easier, which is not a good thing for your endurance. So you're going to basically tire yourself out a lot quicker. So, I mean, I try to explain this to people, and if you can basically use the Cardarine and knock maybe 10 or 15 points from your heart rate, maximum from your heart rate when you're running, it's like increasing your maximum heart rate 10 or 15 points, so you can push a lot faster. So this is really great to use Cardarine for endurance, and in the weight room, it's going to make a big difference. When you're doing sets, your heart rate is increasing when you're in the middle of a set. Even if you're just a power lifter doing 3 or 4 reps, you're going to be able to push on that last rep more, because your heart's not going to be jumping out of your chest as easy. So you'll be able to push throughout your tongue. So you're going to have tremendous endurance, and the endurance with GW is going to come that first few days in that first week. So it really does make a huge difference in your endurance. Mobster, what are your thoughts on Cardarine?
As we've discussed off air, it's something that I've not personally used, but I do know that we've had discussions on the forums with regards to some strength athletes, mostly from the lengthier workouts, getting some benefit. But the endurance side, every single forum post that I've seen where we've had them running logs, where they've run it for lengths of time, every single post has been 100% for the product. I think the only other thing that I refer to, and we'll link to this later on for you, is the use of Cardarine when you're running tren, because of the effect of tren on your cardiovascular ability. If you had it before and you go on tren, then you'll notice a drop-off in your cardiovascular ability. And it's one of the few times that, from my perspective, if I was running tren, I would say, right, I 100% need to bring Cardarine in there, because, you know, I don't want to get out of shape. I don't want to lose any level of fitness and whatever else. In fact, Stevesmi, and I've mentioned this again on the forums, knows I enjoy trail walking. As a guy of my size and who likes to train for strength, is not doing any real cardiovascular work in the gym. I have to get outside. My height, my weight, 300 plus pounds. I have to keep my heart working. I have to keep my lungs working to get used to just the size that I am. And I could see that a product like Cardarine was going to be the ones, well, I'm going to take on the 10Ks when I'm out on the 15Ks. And in fact, since I've got up to the body weight I am now, I'm working back up on those things. I can see Cardarine being fantastic on that. So yeah, 100%. Every single person that we can say has run this on the forum has had positive feedback on their endurance. That's undeniable. Yeah, I think it's going to come down to what the guys are doing to keep staying fit and staying healthy. You know, we like to train for muscle, we like to train for size, but those things aren't always health orientated. To get outside, to get on bikes, to get on the running machines and whatever else, and to use this to boost that, to get there, to get the work done. I think especially perhaps not necessarily as a fat aid in all of itself, but to help you get through your cardiovascular workouts. If you're dropping fat, getting into competition, I can see that maybe bringing in the early stages of that kind of stuff to help you again with those kind of things. But I bow down to Steve's experience in this particular regards, and especially his knowledge on Cardarine. Steve?
Yeah, so let's get into as well the fat burning, because besides endurance, Cardarine is one of the few things out there that actually can directly burn fat. And the way it does is it stimulates fatty acid oxidation. It increases glucose uptake in skeletal muscle tissue. So that's going to change your body's metabolism to burn fat for energy instead of muscle or carbs. So it's really a tremendous fat burning. I noticed with the fat burning after week 4, so into your second month is when the fat burning really comes in. So if you use Cardarine and you want to use it for fat loss, you really want to run it 8 to 12 weeks to get the best results. And also we've seen this from the studies from that they've done on Cardarine. It works so much better when you're exercising and when your diet is on point. So don't think you can just take Cardarine and magically your endurance is going to improve and magically you're gonna burn fat, because you're going to be disappointed in your results. So, you know, the more you push on it, the more, but it's going to motivate you, because no matter what, if you like hiking like Mobster, you're hiking up a hill, hiking up a mountain. If you're a runner, if you even weight training in the gym, just a normal weight training for 50 minutes in the gym, it's going to make a difference in your workouts. You're going to love it. So if you can come off the stimulants, I try to steer people away from the stimulants and you steer toward the Cardarine, it's going to give you that huge difference in that aspect.
Yeah, you've just touched on something, which again, I think I've seen on the forums where we've got specifically running athletes, whether that be middle distance, long distance, looking for an edge. I would not want to say on this podcast whether or not it's drug tested for. So guys, you need to go out and check that information for yourself. Because I don't want to say something now and have you taken that as gospel. You should always check what your federation checks for. But I do recall that we've had athletes, middle distance, long distance runners come on and ask us for an edge. And if they're not already doing something like this, this is almost an ideal product for them in terms of it not really having any other side effects that they can worry about, and adding something to them, making what they already do that little bit easier to do. And yeah, 100%. We've seen those questions asked. I'm pretty sure those are the answers that we've given, and I would stick by that. But I would refer again to what I just said, which is 100%. You must go out and check, because these rules do change, of course, from month to month, year to year, if it's tested for in your federation, just in case. But yeah, so a wonderful product for the endurance. And as Steve said already, my kind of workout with the power training and the heavy weights and the lower volume that I do, I can see some benefit. But if you are a typical trainee, I can see you're going to be powering through. In fact, I would argue, as Steve said already, I would argue better to use a product like this and get for an hour and a half or 2 hours of training, if that's as long as you train, rather than use pre-workouts and stims. I'm not at all keen on those things. Steve knows what I'm about. 4 cups of coffee a day is my limit. I don't use any pre-workouts. Haven't done. And you can go online and check out my log and see what I do. Hopefully the numbers are up there and reasonably impressive. So, I don't need stimulants and pre-workouts. A product like this, today's workout was an hour, but I could see me do an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And there shouldn't be any drop-off. Or if the drop-off's going to come, it's going to come much later in the workout. And that's got to be useful. So yeah, the fat burning side, I think I addressed briefly earlier on, saying if you're doing your cardiovascular to get your body fat down in competition training, with the possible exception, in my opinion, and again, I'd want to look at this in more detail towards the end of competition dieting, 12, 16 weeks. I could see me suggesting 12 weeks. And then the last 4 weeks, we would make some manipulation. We might take it out, we might put something else in there, but definitely useful in the early days. And a great all-round product. And certainly one of the more effective, although technically not a SARM, one of the more popular and effective SARMs that there is. Steve?
So two final points before we move on. How much do you... So 2 final points, how much to use. You're going to use 10 to 20 milligrams a day. It's got a 24-hour half-life. So you want to, make sure you're dosing it once a day. That's plenty. Some guys do notice a difference if they dose it before their workouts, maybe like a couple hours, and that will give them a little peak, but it's a slow peak because it has a 24-hour half-life. So you can do it that way, 10 to 20 milligrams a day. And then the second point is be careful you're getting your Cardarine. It's very common to have fake Cardarine that's really clenbuterol or really just caffeine powder or something like that. And that's a really, really easy way for them to scam you because, you'll notice something if you take caffeine powder and you'll think that that's the Cardarine doing the work, but it's not. It's actually giving you the opposite effects unless you have a heart rate monitor to check that out. So you got to make sure you come on our forums and make sure you check in on the best place to get GW, because most GW out there, probably 95% of GW out there is fake or bulk.
Yeah, just one last point, and Steve just covered it as well. We see this occasionally brought up with all drugs and all SARMs, performance-enhancing drugs. There is no real benefit going much beyond the 20 milligrams a day. It really isn't, guys. If you think, I feel amazing on 10 milligrams, I feel amazing on 20 milligrams, it's having a fantastic effect. Trust me on this. I haven't seen any forum members, any articles really to suggest that you need to go much above that. Unless you're like 500 pounds of muscle, we've never heard of you. You're not going to need 30, 40 milligrams a day. If it works and it's effective at 10, 20 milligrams, then that's what you need to take. You do not need to be thinking, oh, the guys said 20, I'm going to take 40. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be double. No, forget that. It's really effective for pretty much everybody at that 20 milligram dosage. You do not need to double up. Yeah, that's my last word on that one.
All right, so next one, guys. The next topic is topical Yohimflame and gynecomastia, which is bitch tits. So Yohimflame is an interesting product, guys. Does it help with gyno? Not directly. It doesn't help with gyno directly, but what it does do is it can make a huge difference if you do have gyno, because it can help burn that fat. So the ingredients that work on Yohimflame, the Yohimbe and the alpha Yohimbe. Yohimflame is a topical. You spray it on. So the ingredients within it, the Yohimbe and alpha Yohimbe, that's going to prolong your fat loss. That's going to burn fat. It's got 7-keto DHEA, which blocks cortisol, boosts metabolism, and induces lipolysis. It's got synephrine, which increases the oxidation of stored fat, blocks alpha-2 receptors, promotes fat loss. It's got raspberry ketones. That's the ultimate fat burner. It's synergy with synephrine, and it can amplify fat loss. And then the last ingredient I want to talk about is the caffeine that's in it. That's going to shrink the size of the fat cells, and it's going to release that fat. So if you stack the Yohimflame with the Cardarine and do cardio, moderate cardio every day, you're going to have tremendous fat loss results. And it can actually really, really help if you're one of those guys who have those floppy tits or whatever. You're trying to get rid of that chest flop. And as men, the chest is one of those areas where we tend to store excess fat. So a lot of times when you're running steroids, you can actually increase your chance of gynecomastia by having that stored fat, the fat in your body, the higher estrogen, and all that stuff. So the Yohimflame, by burning off that excess fat, that's really hard to get rid of as a male, because our bodies, want to survive, and our bodies want to prepare for a famine that may come one day. Just like a pandemic, you can't get food during a pandemic. So our body has stored up fat in case for emergency. So we tend to store fat 2 places, our stomachs and our chest. So one of the 2 places I like to use Yohimflame myself is my fat on my stomach and my fat on my chest. And it works really, really well for that. Mobster, what do you have on this?
I was thinking, you touched on something just there, Steve, and I was thinking, and I actually had this for some months ago, what you call an old man chest versus a young man chest. I've seen older bodybuilders, older weightlifters, older strongmen, lean, but they get that weird kind of triangle that comes underneath to the pec line, and it's like an old man thing. And whether the pegs were huge before and they've shrunk down, whether it's a loose skin thing that older guys get, I'm starting to get that kind of, 1 or 2 signs that suggest to me whether I like it or not. I'm getting older, and they get that weird triangle under the pec line that kind of goes into the armpit. And I can see Yohimflame working something like that if it was something that I felt I needed to work on. I want to be the guy that says, as always, and this is for all the listeners, make sure that you don't get into the position where you have to do something about gyno in the first place. However, if you are in that position, then a product like Yohimflame is going to help you. So if we say take the AIs, take the AIs, guys. We say get your blood test, get your bloody blood tested. Don't be in a position where you have to ask for our help with gyno. However, we are there to help you. We do have information that's going to help you, and that's when stuff like this is going to help you. It's going to, you're going to do the protocol that we're going to suggest. You're going to reduce your gyno down to the absolute minimum that you possibly can. You might have that last residual part of fat left there, and that's where a product like Yohimflame is going to come in. For the leaner guys, and if we're not referring to gyno, yeah, this is where the product, you can't be walking around with 20 or 30% and hoping that Yohimflame is going to help you. It's just not. But when your body fat's starting to get down to a level where you can see your abs and those annoying areas, which can include around the nipple area, around the bottom of your chest, that's when a product like this is going to help you. You will see a difference, but you need to be lean. You need to follow our advice earlier and not to have a problem later on. Don't be, like Steve said with the previous product, don't be incredibly fat and think you're gonna lose fat just because you're rubbing a cream on it. It doesn't work like that. No product works like that. We would be billionaires, and I'd be talking to you from my diamond castle if we could invent a product like that. It really would, guys. So I want to be the guy that says you have to do those things. Listen to our advice on those topics as well. Listen to the podcast. Take that information, use it, and then when you need to, if you have to, Yohimflame is going to be the product that's going to help you there. Back to you, Steve.
So the way I like to use Yohimflame is what I'll do in the morning, fasted. I'll have some hydration. I like to hydrate before I do my cardio. I don't want to be dehydrated, especially if you live in a hot climate. And what I'll do is I'll do 6 sprays onto my stomach area and 6 sprays on my chest. And then I'll go running shirtless. And, I run while, in that, and then the Yohimflame will dry in a couple minutes, and then you can go ahead and go run, and then just go do your cardio that morning, and then boom, you're done. Like 10-15 minutes of cardio, and then you're done. And then that makes it work even better.
I'm just recalling a conversation you had in a previous podcast. I'm convinced Steve Smith does everything shirtless. I'm pretty sure he goes for job interviews shirtless. So you can take them a picture of he goes running shirtless in the winter, in the autumn. It doesn't matter what time of year it is.
Well, I mean, I'm in Florida, so what winter, man? We don't have a winter here. Winter here is the coldest it gets is like 60 at night, even during the winter. 60 Fahrenheit, which in Celsius is what, like 15 or something Celsius?
Yeah, somewhere like that. It's about that. It's about 21, 22 degrees here today. So I'm probably going to pop out and have a bit of sunbathe afterwards.
Yeah.
I do. I don't think even if I pop outside, I go shirtless. Maybe except on my property. But yeah, whatever. I can't see me going down to the shops or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just recalling something that you've done in previous podcasts, and I'm pretty sure that Steve does everything shirtless. I'm just joshing.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, man. All right, guys. So the next one we're going to get into is SARMS causing estrogen side effects. Is that even possible? So, I mean, looking at blood work over the years, I haven't seen any evidence that SARMS cause estrogen side effects. But it can happen. One of the ways that it can happen is estrogen rebound from a previous cycle. So let's say you ran, testosterone, D-bol, anything that aromatizes on a previous cycle. And then you ran your SARMs, a few months later or something, but you're going through an estrogen rebound from that previous cycle and it hits you right on your SARM cycle. So I can see that because the SARMs isn't going to help you reduce your estrogen. So I can see that happening just as a fluke situation. And, that's possible. But I mean, is there any other ways that can happen, Mobster, where you can get SARMs causing estrogen problems? I can't think of.
I did some prep for this podcast, Steve, and I tell you what came up, which we've actually seen many times on the forum, and that's when the SARM isn't a SARM. We're not going to name and shame on this podcast, but we both know that there are sellers of SARMs, and I'm using inverted commas here when I say that are really selling you pro-hormones. Because they're lazy, because they're cheap, because they want to make a buck. So we know the sponsors that we have on our forums. We know what the products they sell. We've had products of theirs tested. We've got guys that run the products. We sample the products ourselves from time to time. We know what we're getting. We know what the effects are. And then we have members come on the forum, or long-time members, or quite often new members, and I've brought a product from Company X, and Company X product had this effect. It's not a SARM. It is a pro-hormone. And because they haven't treated it like a pro-hormone, because they thought it was a SARM, they've ended up with this effect, which they really, really didn't want to have. That's 100% there. The other thing which Steve touched on is the rebound. What I advise, and again, you can see this from posts I've made on the forums, is have time off between cycles. Have plenty of time off for full recovery. In my mind, and if I was giving you advice, I would say, listen, if you're going to do a steroid cycle, fine. Do this, this, and this. and have as long off as you need. Now, if you want to, and again, this is something I've advised myself and I've seen other people do the same, by all means run a SARM, but have that time off. So the full PCC, make sure there's no issues that you need to do with, then run a cycle of SARMs, then have time off, take as long as you need to for complete and utter recovery, do your blood test, make sure everything is back to normal, you've got no issues, and then run the next SARM or steroid cycle. In that way, you shouldn't see too many issues. And I think the other thing I can think of would be that some people, and it does tend to be the fellas with the higher body fat levels, but some people are very estrogen sensitive. They would be the rare example of where you might potentially see an issue. I think I probably aren't that kind of person, but I can see that there would be people that are like that, and these guys need to be especially careful. I've touched on it when I've said about SARMs being slightly suppressive. I can see that in, again, if you're not running what you think, if you don't know 100% what you're running, or if you're very, very estrogen sensitive, you might potentially have issues. And it's something you need to keep an eye on. In fact, if I run a training log, keep a diary, see how you feel. Don't wait until there's a real problem. Get it looked at straight away. Get your regular blood test if you can afford it, and you've got access to people that are going to do that for you. Keep an eye on these things 100%. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my point of view as far as that's concerned. Back to you, Steve.
Yeah, so let's talk about the next topic. This is a really interesting one. It's TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. Sustanon, omnadren, and versus testosterone, cypionate, and enanthate. So it seems to be in the United States when they prescribe TRT, it's going to almost always be cypionate or enanthate. And then in the UK, when your doctors over there in the UK prescribe TRT, it's going to be Sustanon. And then in Eastern Europe, they tend to gravitate toward omnadren. So the interesting thing is Sustanon and omnadren are the exact same 4 esters, but it used to not be. It used to be one ester was different between them, but now it's exact same thing. Sustanon and omnadren, exact same thing. And then testosterone, cypionate, and enanthate are slightly different. We're talking 2 or 3 day half-life difference. So Mobster, tell us the differences in the half-lives. Tell us what Sustanon and omnadren contain and their half-life of those esters, and then tell us the cypionate and enanthate half-lives, because a lot of people don't really understand about these half-lives.
No, I couldn't tell you what the esters are there, Steve. That was something that I'd have to refer to. But what I did pre-podcast is I looked very simply at the half-lives. And Sustanon, for example, has roughly 15, 16-day half-life, whereas cypionate is roughly 8 days. And that's going to come down to something very simple. And there's 2 kind of points here. One is the frequency of pinning. And it would make sense to me from do I want to pin it that often? No. The less I can pin, the better. If I'm going to do your TRT, which is for life, guys, it's not something you just do for a few years. So let's address that. I want to have the least amount of jabbing possible. I'm going to be doing this year round, and 15 days, I'm talking about 20, 25 jabs a year. That's fantastic. However, what we do sometimes see with TRT, especially when it's self-administered and not doctor-prescribed, and even when it is doctor-prescribed, the doctor's not looking to keep your levels at an optimum level amount of testosterone in your blood. So when you look at it from the self-prescription point of view rather than the doctor-prescribed point of view, the self-prescription wants the blood levels of testosterone to be level, even, all year round. In between cycles, if that's your thing. But even without it, if you're doing it because, let's be honest, guys, it's cheaper for you to self-prescribe than it is a doctor-prescribed, quite often. Private prescription can be quite expensive. And we know that we can get hold of material ourselves for quite often half the price and be just as good. So it's going to come down to then having a level of even level testosterone in your blood versus what a doctor prescription quite often do, because quite often I think it's not unusual, for example, to see months between injection, a month between injection, and not quite often 3 weeks between injections. And 3 weeks, you're going to see a drop off. And if you need TRT, you're going to notice that. You're going to feel 2 weeks fantastic, and then you're going to have that third week waiting for the doctor to give you a jab, go back to the surgery, have the nurse give you a jab, when you're going to start to feel it. I want, if I was going to do TRT, I'd want a level, even amount of testosterone in my blood. So I'd probably go towards the cypionate, if only because it's going to have that frequency, or perhaps even go the other way, go sus, which I like sus actually. I've used that with Deca in the past as one of my more successful cycles. If it's got a 15-day half-life, I'm going to kind of try and stretch it out to 12, 13 days between jabs, so that I've just got that little bit when it's starting to drop off before I inject again. I don't want to wait till it's starting to fall away. I don't want that sense of falling away. I want that sense of well-being that testosterone can give some guys, especially the older gentlemen, especially those needing TRT. So I'm going to look at it from those points of view. In terms of the esters, let's be honest, we can argue back and forth. And I had a buddy that could tell you where the carbon molecule used to go. But it's going to come down to individual response. And we're not looking at the science and the ester data and where the carbon atom goes and all the rest of it. We're looking for how we feel, how we respond, how we train in the gym, how good we look. If you want to argue about the science, there's plenty of guys out there that can sit down and discuss 11 days versus 15 days, carbon atom here, the carbon molecule there. It gets a bit ridiculous. And 9 times out of 10, and without meaning to sound unruly, guys that think about that sort of thing tend not to be the biggest, most muscular guys. It's very rare for you to get some great big meathead who's going to be able to discuss those things with you. I want a response and result before I need to discuss the ins and outs of the science stuff. And of course, I'm pretty sure that we got some articles on our forums that can discuss that for you, but written by better experts than me in that particular regard. I'm more of a practical approach. How often do I pin? How do I feel? And I'm going to look for, I won't say, if there was a drug somewhere in the middle, that would be perfect. If I could have somewhere between 8 days and 15 days, a combination of these two products, that would be amazing. I think Steve said it earlier on that the doctors seem to favour the cypionate, and that's what you're going to get prescribed. There are some TRT clinics in this country. Getting the health service in this country to prefer TRT is extremely rare. I wish it wasn't for athletes like myself and whatever else, where I could go to the doctor and say, listen, I've been doing this stuff for years. I'm just starting to see a full away of strength. I'm just starting to see a full away of my testosterone levels. If we could do that, hell, I'm in the position right now, I could probably pay for it. That would be great. If you want me to pay for it, doctor, you know, £15, £20 a script, that'd be amazing. Thank you very much. But yeah, back to Steve for this one. I think, especially with regards to the chemical and ester makeup.
So here's a misconception. The way Mobster is talking, a lot of you are wondering, like, wait a minute, Sustanon, I thought I'm supposed to inject it every other day. I thought I'm supposed to inject it every third day. If you ask most people, that's what they'll say. And they're correct, and they're incorrect. And Mobster is in the UK, where Sustanon is basically, that's the birthplace of Sustanon. So if he's saying that you're supposed to inject it pretty much every 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, you know, maybe you should listen to that over your bro science person, you know, that you got on YouTube.
Yeah, you just said something there. I will throw up the difference between TRT, of course, and running a cycle for what I want to do in the gym. There is a difference, and I believe Steve is correct. So if we're talking about TRT, that's when I'd want to run the longer times between jabs. If I was, and I have used this in the past, I think I'm trying to think now because it was some years ago, but I'm pretty sure that I did Sustanon Deca, as I said earlier, it was one of my more successful cycles, and got just about as big as I could at that time, and certainly very full, and probably around my peak of strength at that time as well. And I'm trying to think now. I think I would say that I was jabbing Sus once a week, so once every 7 days, and I believe the Deca twice a week. But again, it's a very long time ago. Didn't keep notes at the time, which I would do now. But that's for a competition training. That was to be as big as bulky as possible. From a TRT point of view, it's completely different. Steve's correct in terms of, I don't know about necessarily the birthplace, but it's very easy to get over it. Very reasonably priced. Quite a popular product. And something for me, which I got a great deal out of. But as I said already, bear in mind, we're talking about TRT and not training for a competition, not looking to put on loads of muscle. At TRT levels, for that sense of well-being, for that feeling of health, for the feedback that some guys get, I don't think I do myself that much. I don't have a feel good sense when I'm on testosterone, but some guys do. And Sustanon for me would be, it's just a frequency of jabbing thing. TRT is about that sense of well-being over huge slabs of muscle, great poundage in the gym and all that kind of stuff, which is exactly why I was running it before. I would look at it now 100%. If I say I'm going to go on TRT, Sustanon to me for that less frequency of jabbing, for that sense of well-being, because it did give some effect like that before, would be very, very useful for me. But yeah, we must make sure to differentiate between those two things.
So if you're running a cycle and it's a short cycle, Sustanon is probably not the one you want to use, because most of Sustanon is made of testosterone decanate, 100 milligrams out of the 250. Same thing with the omnadren, and that has an extremely long half-life. We're talking, 15 days plus. Then the next two esters is the isocaproate and the phenylpropionate. Now the iso, you're talking about a 9-day half-life on that, which is close to what cypionate and enanthate are, which are 10 and 12 days, depending on what you look at. And then the phenylpropionate is about 5-6 days, probably closer to 6 days. And then the last one, only 30 milligrams of it is the propionate. And that one is about 4.5 days for the propionate ester. So, the way they designed Sustanon and omnadren is really interesting, because they designed them where you take a large amount infrequently. So you'll dose 250 milligrams of the Sustanon every 2 weeks. That means you only have to inject twice a month. And that's why they designed it for TRT. Now, the disadvantages, what I don't like about Sustanon is the post-injection pain. And that's a problem for certain people. I'm more prone to post-injection pain, I think, than other people. I get post-injection pain pretty much on every injection, no matter what I'm using. Just it's a question of how much. So Sustanon is horrible for me. I'll have like 3 or 4 days where I'll have swelling, and the injection spot will be hot. So I avoid it. I much prefer cypionate or enanthate. It's a smooth injection, and I'll run those. If I'm doing a cycle, I'll run them once or twice a week. I'm good to go. Very, very little post-injection pain. So I'm not a fan of Sustanon at all, but some people are. The first steroid I actually used was Sustanon, only because at that time it was very hard to get pharmacy-grade steroids. You'd have to basically order them international and get it through customs and all that bullshit. So that's one of the reasons why I use Sustanon a couple times, because at that time you could get Organon Sustanon, which is a really, really good brand. And it was hard to find pharmacy grade without a prescription. Go ahead, Mom.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and just reminded me, and Steve touched on it, that if we are doing a steroid cycle rather than TRT, don't forget, guys, that a product like Sustanon is going to be in your bloodstream for 2 weeks after your last jab. Make sure you schedule that in when you're on cycle. A lot of guys, the way things are written, quite often we get this idea that I finished on Friday, it's my last jab, it's my last day of the cycle, and then they forget the fact that this stuff's going to be in your bloodstream for 2 or more weeks.
Yeah, at least 2 weeks, more like even 5-6 weeks until it's lower. So you're not going to fool the doctor. The doctor is going to say, hey, why is your testosterone level so high? So you want to basically make sure that if you're running more than your TRT dose and you want the doctor to redo your prescription, you want to make sure you stop. Even enanthate and cypionate, you want to make sure you stop them at least 4 or 5 weeks prior. Otherwise, it's going to come in high, and he's going to lower your script. So it kind of defeats the purpose of doing it that way. But I wanted to talk to you, Mobster, about self-TRT versus doctor prescribed. So you're telling me that it's hard to get doctor prescribed over there?
It's practically impossible. I've seen on the UK forums these questions come up. And I think, and I touched on it in our last podcast, you literally have to go to a private doctor somewhere like Harley Street, or one of the few private doctors you get in the major cities like Cardiff, just up the road from
Right,
me.
so you could get it, you just have to basically pay for it through a private doctor. You wouldn't be able to get it through the national healthcare system. That's not, yeah.
Honestly, when I know guys that have approached the national health, they've gone to the doctor, they've got, and I mean, these are not guys that are faking the systems. These are not guys that suppress the testosterone to try and get the doctor to do it. These are guys with genuine 100% medical conditions, and it's practically impossible to get a normal GP, what you call an MD in America, to sit down and write you out a script for testosterone. If you're very, very lucky, they're going to be the guys that will suggest that you go to a private doctor. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And it's kind of...
So why not just buy your own and do it on your own? I mean, a vial of testosterone is not expensive.
That would be 100%, honestly. We've mentioned the prices of various testosterones and steroids on the forum. And in the UK, very competitive, 100%. Yeah, honestly, if I was going to, I always define this because I kind of argue about it on the forums a lot. There's an awful lot of guys. Let's clear one thing up. If you're going to, if I was, and I'm right there now, guys, I'm 56 in a couple of weeks. I am at that age when if I needed testosterone replacement, I'm right there. I'm right there right now. And as Steve said already, I could go out. There are plenty of places I can get it, whether I use a forum sponsor or whether I go to a local gym and pay perfectly reasonable prices. And I'm doing my research and jab exactly according to the protocols that we suggested in this podcast. 100%, no mucking around.
But now you're going to have trouble getting blood work because not blood work.
This is the situation that we come up against in the UK. The blood work privately is incredibly expensive and more than the cost of a cycle. But the thing that I was going to touch on, and that was kind of bugbear for me, TRT is for life. I'm at that age where the TRT would be for life. If I want to carry on training until I'm 60 or 70 years of age, TRT would be perfect for me. Do not define TRT, guys, when you're thinking of right now in your late 30s, and you say that you're on TRT, and what you really mean is you're cruising. I despise that when I see it on the forum. And then here's another thing, guys, and I've touched on this multiple times, and it'll probably be addressed as a point or a question in a future podcast. You don't do TRT for 3 or 4 years. That is not what you're doing. You're just cruising. But we have guys come on, and here's the thing: it's because of my age, because of my experience, I see this. You talk about TRT, and then 3-4 years down the road, you're coming to us and asking for baby mating protocols. I'm not producing sperm anymore, Stevesmi. I need, me and my wife and my girlfriend, we want to have a child. Well, then you wasn't on TRT, guys. TRT is for life. It's not. You shouldn't be doing this stuff and saying that you're on TRT. I'm at that perfect age. I've got grandkids. TRT for me right now is no big deal at all. I can afford it. I could run it for the next 30 years. I could run it till they put me in the box. No big deal for me. I'm not going to have any more kids. Hell, I don't even want my daughters having any more grandkids. I don't need to do that. If you're in your 30s and you're telling us in your TRT, you need to be a bit more, be honest, answer the question properly. And if you are taking TRT and you can do what we're suggesting and affording it in this particular way, make sure that you're not, we have seen this on the forums, don't leave it to 2 weeks before you go to see the doc because you're going to need to do some crazy stuff to get your levels down. Look at what you're doing. You know when these appointments are coming up. Schedule it. Give yourself plenty of time. Give yourself 5 weeks. Give yourself 6 weeks between these appointments when you're going to be tested by the doctor. Do things properly. Do the research. Ask us on the forums before you start to do these protocols, before you start to do this stuff. So you've got, hell, you can schedule it into your phone, guys. You can get a reminder. Stop taking TRT today. Put it in your diaries. Do it properly. Here in the UK, as I said, I can't think of every single person I know that's tried to do TRT through the normal way. It's almost impossible. Whereas I can go to my local gym if need be, pick up 35 pounds with Sustanon, run a 10 mil vial, jab. That's going to last me, 20 weeks? If I'm doing 2 weeks between jabs. What's that, £1.75 a week, guys? Easy peasy. But do it properly. Run it as though a doctor was running it for you. In fact, that's probably the best piece of advice I think we could give you. Run it as though you'd gone to the doctor was giving you the injections, the nurse was giving you the injections. Follow the protocol that they're doing. Do it properly. Follow that protocol, follow that advice. I think that's the best piece of information I'm going to give you guys today. Treat it as though a doctor had prescribed it to you and do it exactly that way. With maybe the only thing I would take out of that is that maybe you increase the frequency of injection by a few days. So you don't wait till your blood levels start to drop off. Just to get that feel-good vibe that some guys get from TRT. Yeah, that's me done, Steve.
The problem in the United States, we have, obviously we're seeing the evidence of this with the, the pandemic is like spreading like crazy, but it's because we have poor immune systems in the United States. It's because our food quality is so poor. So what happens is, there's a connection, Mobster, between that and low TRT. We're seeing guys, yes, in their late 30s getting TRT. Not even late 30s. We're talking early 20s. There's guys going on TRT because they have low testosterone levels. Why is that? It has a lot to do with our gut health. It has to do with our bodies are just sick from the poor food. When you keep throwing poor food into your body, what happens is you're not able to absorb the minerals and the vitamins from your food. If you can't absorb the minerals and vitamins in your food, guess what? You're not going to produce your own testosterone anymore. So we're seeing guys 25 years old posting their blood work, and their testosterone levels are like 200 at 25 years old. That's not good.
Yeah. On that particular subject, and I believe we touched on it in the last podcast when we talked about how us here in Britain seem to follow whether we like it or not some of the bad examples, and for that matter, the good examples that America gives us. Here's the thing, guys. If you're, I mean, I've done this. I've been there. This is old school. And Steve said we got the 70 years between us. I've done the crazy amounts of work. I've done the stress and over certain situations. And I think what happens now, and we are seeing this in a generation where if the doctor prescribed medication can and will have an effect on your testosterone levels. The stress, the generation that's coming up 2 generations behind me, is barely going to be able to afford houses and pay their bills and enormous amounts of debts. If you don't think that's an effect on your testosterone, you need to look at that stuff. It really does. Stress levels, the chemicals in the water, the drinking water, and Steve speaks on this, the drinking water in America, never mind the drinking water here in the UK, which I believe is slightly better, but the drinking water in America, that stuff that comes out of a tap contain testosterone suppressing chemicals from fertilizers in the ground. Then you've got, if you live in a big city, I think Steve would probably agree with this. If you live in a big city and did an air quality test and see if that air quality is having an effect on your testosterone. So you're talking about chemicals, you're talking about pollution, you're talking about diet. And we know, because we're seeing this, that I think there was a study, and I would argue what the percentages are, but generation on generation, I believe that the testosterone levels in your average guy, who should be really at his peak around 30 to 35 years of age, is dropping generation by generation. And why is that? Because of stress, because of diet, because of the situations, because of how we lived, staying up late, being on your cell phones, all the obvious things. And before you go on TRT, there's a ton of stuff that you guys can do. You can stop going out and buying the latest car and the biggest TV and all that kind of stuff. Reduce your bills. That's a stress reliever right there. I'm a great believer in that. I live a very simple life. Got a nice big lump of cash in the bank. No mortgage. Look at me, not on TRT. I'm not saying my diet's perfect, far from it. But we discussed it previously. I try to eat all the stuff I'm supposed to eat first, and then all the junk food after. I don't do it the other way around. We are, as a generation, starting to see that drop off. And there are a number of reasons why. And TRT would help you, but why don't you start by helping yourself first? Reduce your stress, eat clean, train, get down the gym. These TRTs being given to guys that have never been inside the gym in their life. They don't do enough exercise. They don't eat clean. They're doing all the hours God sends just to pay the bills. And if you keep your life simple, you reduce those things down, you get rest, you get recovery, you eat clean, you eat your greens, you do all the stuff that your mum told you to do. Trust me, guys, it makes a difference. And you'll be the healthy example for the rest of your generation. And if, because we are getting older, you end up in a position that I'm in, being able to work out and train at my age, doing what I'm doing, and then if you need TRT, well then fantastic. I can only imagine that if I start doing an injectable form of TRT very soon, it's going to be amazing. I should feel fantastic because I'm doing all the other things that you need to do already. Make sure you don't just use a drug to cover up for that stuff. If you're still doing 60, 70 hours a week of work, if you're stressed, if you aren't paying your bills, then the TRT is just going to make you feel good from that perspective. But the other things are going to stress you, and it's going to impact And it does 100% impacts on your testosterone levels, your natural levels. So keep that in mind. I think that Steve covered it when he said the age. The guys that are being prescribed TRT, it seems to be getting younger and younger and younger all the time. And you have to ask yourself why. Yeah, and if you ask yourself why, if you ask yourself what's going on in your life and what you aren't doing that you could be doing, make those changes. Do those things first before you go get a prescription. And then if you have to, we're there. We're going to give you the advice that we need to give you. We're going to help you. I'm going to be the guy that points out, make sure you do this, this, and this. Let's see an improvement. And again, blood test. I guarantee you guys, I would almost give you a buck for it, that if you went and did those things that we're telling you to do, you'll see an improvement. You'll see how you feel. Your stress levels are going to go down. I think Steve's talked about a water purifier for your tap water coming into the house. You can have air conditioning systems, the HEPA filters to filter out the pollutants in the atmosphere. There's a bunch of things that you can do, and you can eat clean. I think the younger guys especially need to learn how to cook from scratch, eat well, eat clean, and tell me you go and get your blood test done. I guarantee you that you're going to see better results. So there you are, 30, 35, 40, when you start to see those levels drop off. Then TRT can come in. Long as possible before you need to start taking a medication. It would be the best advice there. And do all that stuff that I've just told you to do. Steve?
Yeah, eating out is so bad. We see restaurants, they use the oils that they're put in the restaurants. You guys don't have this problem in Britain as much as we do here, but the restaurants, they like to put sunflower oil, canola oil, all these rapeseed oils, all these oils that don't belong in our body. They basically go in your body and they start attaching themselves. So if you've grown up eating that type of food, and it's not your fault that your parents were feeding you this stuff. So I don't like to blame the victim. There's things that you can control now, but there's things that already happened that you have no control over. If you grew up in a town where, an industrial town where they were burning coal down the street from you, and you're breathing that in, and all that crap was going into your rivers and then going into the ground, and now you're drinking that water, then it's going to pollute you. It's going to pollute your body. And it's very difficult to recover from that. Gut health. In the United States, we eat too much food. We eat too often. That destroys your gut health. We take all these drugs, these prescription drugs, that destroys your gut health. All this stuff in our foods, all these oils, they destroy your gut health. And if you have no gut health, then you cannot absorb the minerals that you need to produce testosterone. It all goes back to that. So right off the bat, what you can do is start eating organic, start eating whole foods, stop eating out. Like Mobster said, you need to start cooking your own food. Get the plain foods and cook it yourself. It's not that difficult to buy an air fryer, to buy a barbecue, to buy this, and start, you put your own marinades that you're making from scratch, not the marinades from the store that contain, again, these oils and these chemicals like high fructose corn syrup that don't belong in the body.
Yeah, you just reminded me something, Steve. I completely forgot about this. It's incredibly relevant here. I took part in a scheme, a national health scheme, in fact, because I live in the valleys of South Wales, famous for many, many generations, although not so much now, with the coal mines, the coal dust. We had a furnace-side plant down the road that used to put pollutions into the atmospheres and ruin the health of the generation of fellows that were working there. So what they did a few years ago is they invited me and everybody that was over the age of 45 to pop along to their local doctors and have a series of tests. And they wanted to see why guys of my generation who had lived there all their lives were dying younger than the national average. And why the men and not the women? Well, the women, of course, weren't working down the coal mines, or if they did, it was very, very rare. So the guys were working down the coal mines, the guys were breathing in the coal dust, the guys were having wet sandwiches from working down the coal mines, and they were working at the furnaces and the processing plants and whatever else. And then they were going out and drinking and doing crazy stuff because they'd been down the coal mine and because they kind of deserved this drink that they'd had and whatever else. And unfortunately, they were dropping down dead, I believe it was 5 to 6 years ahead of the national average. So I went along, they tested my bloods, weighed me, measured me, and done a bunch of other tests. Unfortunately, because I trained, I did quite well on the test, to the point with one of the nurses, female nurses, had a worse profile than I did, despite the fact that I probably weighed at that time 280, 290 pounds. But yeah, This was very, very true of the generation behind me that lived here in the valleys of South Wales, because they lived in a highly polluted area, because they were working 12-hour shift down the coal mines, because their diet was very poor, because their alcohol was quite high. They were having all these particular problems. And fortunately for me, such as it was, coming from London and then Gloucester on the way up here, I didn't have too many of those problems. I hadn't had that kind of lifestyle. And of course, I've trained for a very long time. So I'd had half an eye on healthy eating and training and the trail walking. So I did quite well on those tests, fortunately for me. But guys, it makes a huge, huge difference. And doing all the things that Steve and I have suggested will have a difference to it. I wouldn't think that we could go so far as to claim that you'll live longer and feel great, but I would go so far as to say that it will have an effect on your testosterone levels, how you feel, and doing those things will make you feel better. It sounds like, sort of what we call in this country old wives' advice, but it's true. And then when you get to a certain age, you can bring in the TRT. Let's not everyone TRT too early. That's when you need it. Let's make sure that we give you the advice to get you well, to make you feel good. That's what we're about. That's what Evo's about. That's what we're doing on these podcasts. We're trying to give you the lifelong advice that we can throw at you and have you nagging you like old women, as we would say over here as well, to get you to do the right things, to make you feel good, to do the stuff that we say, to follow the protocols, to take our suggestions, and have you come back 5 or 10 years down the road onto the forums and say, guys, you gave me great advice. Look how great I feel. I didn't have to go on TRT. I did this stuff that you told us to do. This is what we want. This is what we're about. This is what these podcasts are for. We want to be in your face, and sometimes I'm going to have to use the phrase bitch slap you, but I'll do that so that when you come back, you go, you know what, Mobster was right, Stevesmi was right. I've done those things. Here I am, and thank you very much. And we're going to wait for you guys to tell us that. We're looking forward to it. Stevesmi?
Yeah, and guys, you're going to hear a lot of opinions online. Like I can remember there was a thread, a couple people trying to, it doesn't matter what you eat as long as it fits your macros, as long as it's the same amount of calories. You know what? Canola oil, a spoonful of canola oil is the same amount of calories as a spoonful of unrefined coconut oil. That's the same thing. See, these people are just looking at one way. It's just like they're one-dimensional thinking. They don't understand that, like what Mobster was saying about that study they did in Britain. It affects you. That canola oil you put in your body, it goes in your body and it starts attaching to things, and it's going to affect the way your body reacts, and it's going to lower. And these are the same guys on TRT at like 25 years old, and they're lecturing me about this stuff. But they have to go on TRT at 25 years old because they keep poisoning their body. You're basically poisoning your body. So it matters what you put in your body, guys. Don't listen to these people that think that just because something a diet soda is 0 calories, so yeah, go drink 50 diet sodas a day and it's not going to affect your testosterone levels. Guess what? It will affect your testosterone levels. And stress, what Mobster said, 100%. Stress is a killer. We all want that huge house, the 3 cars, the boat, the trophy wife, the 5 kids. But guys, if you overload yourself, you young guys, when you get older, don't overload yourself. Don't start having kids and all this stuff, and you're going to end up being so stressed out over things.
Let me give you 2 very quick examples. First, this is what we call selective research. We see this sometimes actually in proper research themselves, where they've kind of manipulated the data to get the result that they wanted. This happens a lot when it comes to online searching for information, and what will happen is that the way that you look for information, the way you search for information provides you with the proof of the opinion that you already held, whereas really you should be questioning the opinion you already held. So guys can find examples of science that backs up what they're saying, but they're literally looking at 1 or 2 pieces of research. Go out and look at 15 or 20 pieces of research. Suddenly the information that they've argued over doesn't look quite so clear cut. So and the other example I was going to give you, I did some voluntary youth work when I first come up here, and we had a social care worker whose specific thing was the youth in Rhondda Cannon South, in the county where I live. And it was down to high fructose corn syrup that Steve mentioned earlier on. I've probably been guilty of this myself. Ready meals. So you're not going out, you're sitting at home, but you're buying a pre-made meal frozen from the supermarket. And the reason it tastes so nice is because it tastes sweet. And the reason it tastes sweet is because of high fructose syrup being added to it. So what the social care worker essentially said is that the number of children in Rhondda Cannon South, those parents were out at work, were coming home and cooking a ready meal because they'd done a 10-hour shift, they'd driven an hour to get home, mum has gone out, dad's gone out, they're doing this to provide, to pay the bills. They were preparing ready meals. And so what they found was that the cavities, the tooth damage, the damage to the children's teeth up to the ages of about 16 were higher in that percentage of the population when mum and dad were both working and coming home and cooking ready meals. So literally that diet, which, you know, mum and dad, they were providing food, they're putting food on the table, they're being loving, they're being caring, but what they haven't noticed is that one of these ingredients is actually affecting the health of the children. And those are children. Those aren't grown-ups, aren't people out looking after themselves, cooking for themselves and doing all the other things. As adults, these are kids. So if it's having that effect before you're 16 years of age, how much of an effect do you think this stuff's going to have on you when you get older if you carry on following this kind of stuff? So going back to that, and again, it's the sort of thing, I'm fortunate, my mum, one of 4 brothers, no sisters, we were taught, you know, peel a potato and learn to cook yourself. Show me a recipe book that tells you to put corn syrup in your food when you're cooking it. Show me a TV chef that's adding corn syrup to a meal. They're not. And there's a reason for that. That's because you're cooking it fresh, you're eating it fresh. It doesn't need to taste nice. It doesn't need to satiate the masses. It doesn't need to be in a freezer for 3 months or 6 months. And it doesn't need to be zinged into the microwave and slapped onto your plate. You can do, in fact, hell, guys, you can spend a couple of hours at the weekend cooking these things from scratch and freezing them yourself because you're going to eat them that week. Trust me on this one. And the last thing was what Steve's mentioned as well. Oh, my God, I despise the if it fish or macros. Come on. If carbohydrate was made out of a cream donut and that's all we could have and it worked, then you would see Mr. Olympia's talking about that side. You would see strongmen on World's Strongest Man talking about that kind of thing. It's bullshit. Quality food. Dexter Jackson, as Mr. Olo, sat down and he said, 100%, if it fits with macros works, I would do it, but it doesn't. Fresh salmon, fresh tapia, sweet potato, that kind of stuff. Cooked, you cooks it. If you've got to season it, you make the seasons. Cook that stuff. There's no recipe book I can think of, and no TV chef, like I've already said, that puts high fructose corn syrup into their recipes. Good grief, could you imagine if they did? But the stuff in the supermarkets, the stuff at your deli is just full of that sort of thing, with the sulfates and God knows what else. Get that stuff out there and show me. I guarantee, I would put good money on the fact that your numbers are going to come back better because you're doing these things. And again, so it's going to sound like old wise advice. It's going to sound like the sort of thing my mum used to tell me when I was a kid. But trust me on this: when you keep these habits for life, when you do these things, you will notice a difference. I should probably get a blood test just to prove my point by saying my testosterone levels are higher, just to show you guys. Maybe that's something I should think for the future, because I have a feeling that I'm going to do quite well, and I'd be quite disappointed if I didn't. And how the hell am I managing to do some of the stuff that I'm doing if I'm struggling? I don't think that I am. So I'd like
so you guys in Britain have high fructose corn syrup in your foods too?
Yeah, the ready meals in the supermarket, and I'm guilty. I probably brought one just the other day as a pasta thing in, it says serves 2, but that's hardly ever true in my case, even if it does provide me with 2 meals. And you can turn these things over and look at the ingredients, and you should be looking for the carbohydrate source to be genuine. In the example I've just given, proper pasta, proper cheese, proper bacon bits or whatever, there's stuff in there. It shouldn't be full of sulfates, but so often, almost every single half-prepared meal that you can think of that's frozen, and you might have to add a little bit to, or you can season yourself, 9 times out of 10 there'll be high fructose corn syrup in there. And specifically, as the ones I mentioned earlier on, the proper actual ready meals, you can buy stuff, for example, even in the local shop by me, sausage mash and onions. That's a very straightforward meal, very easy to prepare yourself. Butcher pork sausages, fresh onions, fresh potatoes. And you can make that stuff probably in 25 minutes, prepare it and cook it in about 25 minutes. But you can buy that as a ready meal. Turn that thing over, look at the ingredients on the bottom, and high fructose corn syrup is in there, just as common as it is in the States. And it does have an effect. As I said earlier on, I gave you the example with the kids, it was having an effect on their teeth. And that's as children, it's going to have an effect on your health. And it's incredibly common. I did touch on it on a previous podcast. We don't quite yet have the habit of going out for food quite as much as you do in the States, or having fast food brought in. But we're not far behind. I think it's one of those things that when you start to have some disposable income, you start going out for more food. And it's getting to become where some people don't think that they are, but when you look at their diets, they're having fast food 4 days a week, 5 days a week. And even during the lockdown that we've had recently, we've had McDonald's starting to open up and the drive-thru starting to open up, and the queues for fast food. Again, guys, please look at the ingredients. Sodium content, nitrates in the meats, and corn syrup as a way of sweetening plain food so that it tastes nice and comes out looking appetizing from the microwave. Great, it filled a gap, but it's not healthy. It's meant to be a now and again thing. It's not to be something you have all the time, but it's becoming something that people have all the time, to the point where, as I said earlier on, an example that I gave, 5 days a week for working when both the sets of parents are working and no one's at home to prepare the food, and the children are waiting for the parents to come home so they can have their evening meal. It's starting to become an issue, and it does affect your long-term health. I would give my guarantee on that, 100%. Steve?
Yeah, and guys, the thing is, the restaurant industry and restaurants and bars and all this stuff, and the food companies, they've been putting this stuff in our food for the past 20, 30 years in the United States. And the studies are there. The real life studies are there. Just look at how sick our country is. I think people around the world laugh at the United States. They just view us as a bunch of just unhealthy fat people, and truly we are. You can just come to the United States and just go to Walmart and look around. Everybody's in bad shape. So what you put in your body is something you can control now as adults. As kids, yes, your parents, were giving you. I used to drink growing up. We had what's it called? A pump. A well. I drink well water, and my dad would dunk like a gallon of Clorox into the well water before it would come into the house. And that's what I was drinking growing up. And has it affected me? Yes, of course it's affected me. I think today my asthma is because of that. And those types of effects make a big difference. All those toxins I was getting from poor water. So, at the end of the day, we can't control what happened, but now you can control going forward what you do. It makes a huge difference, guys, what you put in your body. So, all right.
Yeah, you just mentioned something there. In fact, something, again, an experience from when a job I was doing in London at the time. I worked in central London for the best part of 14 and a half years. And the union of the job that I was in at the time was concerned that the pollution, we were dealing specifically with traffic in and around places, tourist points like Oxford Circus and around Buckingham Palace, the Palace of Westminster and so on. If we did a shift dealing with the traffic for more than 4 hours, our noses would fill up with the pollutants. Our ears would get black out. The mucus in our noses would be black with the pollution coming off the vehicles that we were dealing with. And the union at the time was concerned that we should have a study. Why wasn't we wearing face masks? Why wasn't we wearing filter masks? Because they felt that we were at risk, and there was no long-term study that had been done at that particular time. But it's one of those things that you start. An example up here I mentioned earlier on with the Furnace-site plant. Furnace-site is, I think it's called a smokeless fuel, but they had to kind of cook it in order to make it smokeless, and in order to do so, it made it the product porous, and this was what was tearing up the lungs of the old guys, to the point where they had emphysema, which is essentially when you see people walk around the supermarket where you are, whether it's the States or in the UK, and they've got the thin tube up the nose and they're carrying an oxygen cylinder, it's because they can't breathe. And unless they've got a specific medical condition related to something else, a lot of the time it's because they've worked with steel, they've worked with coal, they've worked with pollution. Some of these much older guys are old enough to have been loading the furnaces on ships and whatever else. And the reason why changes have been made in their time to our time for people that do that stuff to wear filter masks is because of that. Now, if you work in a city, you're going to be breathing in more pollution than if you work and live in a country. If you work indoors, you're going to be dealing with less pollution than if you work outdoors. It's just some of it's stuff we're very, very good. Even here, where I am, the water tastes better here in the town where I live versus the water that's coming into Cardiff, the nearest major city. And that's only 35 miles away. And that's probably just because the reservoirs down here tend to be open. Not all of them, but some of them are open, and the ones that are closer to the major city will be more open and have pollutants getting into them than the ones that are high up in the mountains and the hills and the valleys of Wales where I am. So it's just stuff like that. Honestly, guys, you don't think it makes a difference, but it will over a lifetime. So the advice that we're giving you here is the stuff that you can apply today, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, and it will make a difference. Whether that's clean water, clean air, looking after yourself, taking your vitamins, cooking fresh food, all of that kind of stuff. It should be common sense advice. I can understand when you're rushing around. When I was doing the crazy hours, 14-hour days and all that kind of thing, you're not going to come home and peel a bunch of vegetables and prepare food and whatever else. But you can do that stuff at weekend. There are companies there that provide these kind of products. Look at what's on the pack. Look at how it's prepared. You may pay $1 or $2 extra, but it will make a difference in the long run. You're just going to feel great for it. And that's, again, this is the sort of stuff we want to come out of this podcast. It's healthy advice that's going to make a long-term difference to your lifestyle and to your well-being. And hey, that's what we're about. Well-being, being healthy, and being able to smash the fucking weights down the gym is what we're about, right? Let's get down there, get bars, run up the mountains, and lift enormous weights and then fantastic muscles. That's what we're all about, guys. Come on. So let's do those things. Let's make a difference. And listen to Uncle Steve and listen to Uncle Mobster.
Yeah, you can get whatever, even if you're the biggest jock and you're the strongest guy in your gym and everything, you can improve yourself just by improving your health. Just that little bit makes a huge difference in it. So guys, I mean, we can hit this topic for a full show. We're out of time though, but we'll definitely come back to this because there's a lot of other stuff we can talk about when it comes to this. So for Stevesmi and Mobster is another episode of Evolutionary Hardcore Radio. Episode 101. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll have a 102 up next week. Take care, buddy.
Ta-da.